Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Several years ago, my father sent me a video. It was of the Rabbi Emeritus at our family synagogue in Denver, standing in the botanical gardens next to what appears to be a small lemon tree. But this was not any citrus. This was a native-grown, Denver, Colorado-grown etrog tree. With great care, a gardener took out his blade, sliced the branch, and with reverence and joy, the rabbi received a freshly cut etrog straight from the tree to bring back to the synagogue and celebrate Sukkot with the entire kahal. This amazed me. For my entire life, I had been told something with such confidence, with such blasé, it never even occurred to me at one time, even once, to question it, and it was this: etrogs are grown in Israel. Maybe that's not something you were taught. It's definitely something I was taught. And afterwards, it was quietly reinforced for me every single year when Sukkot rolled around. This colorful cardboard box would arrive from Israel with beautiful Hebrew scrawled all over the outside. And as a young child, my father would unpack the etrog, and it came wrapped in some kind of hair, which added to the mystique at the moment, as opposed to today, it comes in perfectly cut styrofoam with a little shape in the middle. And my father would take it out and he would inspect the pitom, the spot from the branch on the etrog where once it was connected to the tree, to make sure that it hadn't broken off, that it was still kosher. And before he would let me smell it, he showed me that if you gave it a little knock, like either knocking on the door of a house or like knocking on your heart on Yom Kippur, this unique fruit would give off the most beautiful and splendid smell. And this was ancient, and I knew this came from over there. So imagine my surprise, decades later, to see a tree in Denver, Colorado, of all places, producing etrogs. Now, my home city has beautiful climate, in my opinion, but it's not Mediterranean climate. American etrogs. Is that allowed? Well, of course. Well, kind of. I will come back to that. I will come back to that at the end, I promise. So having dipped one toe into the well of knowledge, I quickly realized how little I had ever thought about the etrog. Even if etrogim come from Israel today, where did we grow them for the thousands of years when the land of Israel was closed to us? Without modern shipping methods, how did merchants get etrogs to Jews around the world in time for the holiday without them rotting, without them going bad? What else had I never once thought to think about the etrog? And so I dove in, and this morning, we're going to share together. So where did etrogs come from? Where do Jews get etrogs from? And even today, where do Jews get etrogs from? There is significant debate if the etrog is an indigenous fruit to the land of Israel. It is ubiquitous to the Jews, but never explicitly described in Torah. Instead, it is called Pri Eitz Hadar, or the fruit of the splendid tree. The etrog is not listed amongst the 7 species of the land of Israel. And furthermore, amongst the 7 species, the fruit of the 7 species, all of these things are self-sufficient style plants. They are water-light plants. Figs, dates, grapes, pomegranates, all of them are benevolent in this way. You give them a little water and they thrive. An etrog requires significant irrigation in order to grow healthy and strong. So, whether it originally hailed from China, as some say, or Persia, as others claim, or the Garden of Eden itself, as our sages claim, or somewhere else on the coast of the Mediterranean, it's a mystery. But over 3,000 years ago, the etrog found its way into the lives of the Jews, and it has never left. Some academics argue that the reason why the etrog is found as part of our symbolic status and symbolic ritual during Sukkot is because in the temple during this time of year, classically, there was a water offering. And that was, of course, as well when the prayer for rain begins. So our ancestors had wonderful agricultural instincts. They see this healthy, beautiful, strong etrog. They see something that was grown with an incredible amount of water, and therefore it is easy for them to muster up their gratitude for all of that water and to return that gratitude to God and then once again beseech God on high for more water. It is all part of this cycle of water and God and blessings. It comes naturally to them because they understand the agricultural implications of seeing such a beautiful fruit. Historians point out that by the time of Alexander the Great, which is after the fall of the first temple, but before the story of Hanukkah, the etrog was as much a symbol of the Jews as the Magen David is today. Across ancient mosaics in the Jewish world, on ancient coins during the times of the Romans, the lulav and the etrog are the prevalent Jewish symbol, especially in the time of Bar Kokhba. There are silver coins decorated with lulav and etrog, and sometimes just the etrog, alongside the words, "For the freedom of Jerusalem." And after the fall of the Second Temple, and the exile of the Jews throughout and beyond the Roman Empire, the etrog comes with us. The Sukkot rituals, lulav and etrog, are described in significant detail in the Mishnah and later on in the Talmud. Because of the wisdom of our rabbis, Sukkot, our pilgrimage festival, can still happen without the temple. But Sukkot becomes impossible without an etrog. So once you're outside the land of Israel, where are you gonna get an etrog? Well, at first, this isn't actually too much of a problem. In today, what we would call the Sephardic lands, northern Africa and the Mediterranean, southern Spain, the climate for growing etrogs is consistent with what our people had known for many centuries. But as the centuries continue to turn, and as exile stretches on and on and on, our people keep going north. They continue to travel, sometimes of their own will, sometimes by force, and they end up in northern climates and distant lands such as France and Germany and Poland and Russia, and a water-hungry Mediterranean citrus is not going to grow in Russia. And so, the Jews of Europe turn back to the Sephardic communities in the south to solve their problem. And soon the Jews of Morocco and Greece and Italy and Yemen and Spain are cultivating etrogs for the entire Jewish world. And I will return to that as well shortly. Jumping a millennia and ahead a bit, in the mid-19th century, with the first movement of Zionism and the formal return of Jews to the land of Israel, you have pre-state kibbutznikim farmers who are beginning to export etrogs grown in the land of Israel to a deeply dubious European Jewish population. And simultaneously, across the sea, in California, there is a burgeoning California etrog industry which is destroyed by a series of early frosts and never recovers. As a result, today, the vast majority of diaspora Jewry in North America especially indeed still purchases their etrogs from Israel. And in Genoa, Italy, and in the northern Atlas Mountains of Morocco, and in Corsica, France, there are very high-quality etrog groves because 1 year out of 7, during the Shemitah year, there is significant concern about whether or not an etrog grown in the land of Israel is kosher. So that roughly answers the question of, where do etrogs come from? And so now we can turn our attention to the other big question, which is, what does a distribution chain look like for the etrog before modernity? Because today, if you want an etrog, you could have gone to our website and clicked on the button. Or you could drive that way, on Bathurst, a few blocks, and gone to any of the pop-up shops. Or if you were doing fancy kosher grocery shopping up in Thornhill at the Olive Branch, you could have gone and simply grabbed yourself an Arba Minim set, including whatever etrog you pick out for yourself. But how did our ancestors in Russia and Poland and France and Germany get Mediterranean fruit in time for the holiday? Enter the etroger. I love this. University of Pennsylvania professor Joshua Teplitsky explains, my ancestors come from Eastern Europe. How would they get this etrog in time for the holiday? With the etroger. The etroger was a wandering peddler, a profession that began sometime in the later Middle Ages, who, in time for the holidays, would make the journey north into Central and Eastern Europe, bringing with him the etrogs that were grown in Sephardic Jewish communities. And this was a sometimes lucrative, but very dangerous profession. The etroger would start his travels in the month of Av, and he would continue going out Europe throughout all of Elul, moving on, selling, until the very start of the holidays in Tishrei. And it was only at the end of Sukkot, and therefore, thinking about Eastern Europe, the turn of autumn into winter, that he would only then begin his slow journey back to the coast. And one exhibit on the history of the etrog, which was held in New York just a few years ago, suggests that the beautiful etrog box of silver or of painted wood is actually an invention of the etroger. Because by keeping the fruits individually wrapped and protected, there was less of a chance on any one of them for wear and tear, for blemishes which might make it treif, or for the pitom to be broken. And so this simple shipping method, and that's really what it was a shipping method to keep this guy's stock safe, became, as it always is with the Jewish people, an opportunity for chidur mitzvah, for beautifying the mitzvah. And now, today, these beautiful etrog boxes are generational heirlooms handed down inside of families. Now, it did not go unnoticed to various European merchant guilds or monarchs or warlords that Jews would pay an astronomical sum for something that looked a lot like a lemon. And so occasionally, our friends would insert themselves into the trade of what they sometimes called the Judenapfel, the Jewish apple. For instance, after winning a regional war in 13th century Italy, Florence dominated the etrog trade and forbade any rival city-states from ever trading in etrogs for over 200 years. In the Austro-Hungarian Habsburg Empire, the empress realized that she could levy a high tax on Jews, and for her entire reign, there was a 40,000 florin annual tax on all Jews in the Habsburg Empire for the right to import an etrog. She held our communities hostage over the etrog. And yet, they kept coming. The etrogers kept marching, because as long as a single etrog could make its way to a Jewish community, our ritual and our holiday continued. Which brings me back to the Denver etrog. An etrog is a vulnerable, temperamental plant. It produces fruit only 5 years after it reaches maturity, and most only live for 10 to 15 years total. Once again, our ancestors were clever farmers, And they understood that there were ways to graft one tree onto another. And so using a much hardier lemon tree, for instance, you could add 30 years onto the life of your etrog tree. Grafted etrog trees are called murkav, and they have deeply dubious halachic status. Neither the Talmud nor Maimonides have anything bad to say, but they don't have anything good to say either. And then later, the further on, post-Middle Age halachic authorities get very uncomfortable with the idea of the grafted etrog tree for a lot of different reasons. And for one reason especially, it appears, that they were in the etrog business themselves. Forbid this entire kind of etrog for being used in ritual purposes. And so one of the things that makes a kosher etrog is not just that the pitom is in place, it's not just that it's beautiful or without blemish, it's that the rabbi who supervises the grove promises that this is a tree grown from a real, non-murkav, non-grafted etrog tree. That's what makes it a kosher etrog. And while that might seem a little silly or a little infuriating, it is also a very real, physical, tangible link, a real little bit of time travel, if you think about it, that promises that the fruit that you are holding is the same exact fruit as it was for our ancestors literally thousands of years ago. And so I wrote to the Denver Botanical Gardens, and I asked them, what kind of etrog tree do you have? And they had a very comprehensive form letter that they sent back to me, promising me that it is a true etrog, not a grafted etrog, and that it is 100% certified kosher and ritually fit. 12,000 kilometers from its original home, 2,000 years of wandering later, a kosher etrog, born from Mediterranean climate, still fragile and delicate, today grows in the city at the base of the Rocky Mountains. And to me, that sounds a lot like a miracle. Shabbat Shalom. Chag Sameach a little early.